Joe's is one of the more popular grocers in America. Its stores are regularly packed, and the products it sells and doesn't sell are often topics of discussion on social media. While the company operates in the public domain, there is still much to learn about one of the nation's largest resellers of private label products. Welcome to Store Brand Spotlight. I'm Greg Sleeter, Executive Editor of Store Brands. Today we're chatting with Ericka McCoy, CMO at AI-powered consumer data and intelligence company Resonate. Ericka will discuss with us various topics related to Trader Joe's to provide unique insights about the grocer and why its customer base is so loyal. Ericka, welcome to the podcast.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's our pleasure. Ericka, to start with, Resonate recently did a pretty deep dive into Trader Joe's actually more Trader Joe's shoppers. Can you talk about that study and what you were hoping to glean out of that?
Yeah. So one of the things that we love to do is do deep dives into different types of retailer audiences. And frequently we like to compare what you would appear to be similar audiences. So you think about grocery shoppers, or if you think about mass merchant shoppers, right? There's things that they have in common. And then there's usually those distinct nuanced differences in those audiences that give the retailer an opportunity to really engage a customer in a unique way. And so we like to do those types of analyses. A lot of interesting news about Trader Joe's with the tote bag kind of situation. And we're like, wow, let's take a look at Trader Joe's shoppers and go a little deeper and compare and look at what makes these shoppers unique, what makes them so loyal to the brand. And so that's really why we dove into what is really our platform. We can do that. You can take a look at any brand pretty much at any time because we have a ever living, breathing kind of repository of consumer data.
Ericka, when you're looking at the data from the study, were there any surprises about who is shopping Trader Joe's?
There weren't surprises so much as who is shopping, but there were some surprises for me about the type of shopper they are. And what I mean by that is, we are in a very sensitive time for shoppers. We've been tracking the pulse of the consumer with inflation, sensitivity about prices. And what we've seen is, as inflation and kind of worries about inflation have gone up and down, even though there's data that says inflation is better than it was, there's obviously price sensitivity that's still occurring. And what we've been tracking is generally consumers are starting to show some disloyal behaviors. And what I mean specifically is consumers are choosing to shop at alternative stores. They're choosing to shop at to buy different brands, perhaps store brands over their loyal brand. We're starting to see that really increase, particularly over the last 6 months. And what was unique about the Trader Joe shopper is that they were less inclined to be disloyal, which I thought was great because obviously as retailers, that's a big concern right now.
And it's interesting you talk about the growth of private label and private brands. That's what they do. It's all about private label, but I think they position it as it's unique and it differentiates themselves from the grocer up the street or from Walmart. Do you get a sense that part of that is keeping that high level of loyalty with their shoppers?
Definitely. I mean, these are shoppers who are really aligned to the brand Trader Joe's. So yes, it is their brand, but their brand has attributes that are really, really resonant with this shopper base. They are 70% more likely to be sustainable shoppers than the average shopper. They of course are huge organic shoppers to a large extent, but they really care about the environment. They care, and they are people who will shop based on important issues. So I think that's the big thing that's interesting about Trader Joe's audiences, and this is something that all retailers really need to be aware of. Like, who in my customer base is a consumer activist? Like, who will shop their values, as we like to say. And the Trader Joe audience is one that does shop their values. So the values that Trader Joe aspires to align with their shoppers, which keeps them loyal. And it's not always what you expect, but those are the things that are really important and more increasingly important to shoppers today.
Does the data you have when you look at specifically shopper habits, do you get a sense of how Trader Joe's has managed to navigate through the current inflationary period?
Well, it's interesting because this segment of shoppers seems less sensitive to the switching behavior or to the price that's driving switching behavior. When we compare them to other U.S. shoppers in particular, there's much a higher inclination for those shoppers to feel sensitive to the price increase and want to switch. This shopper base is really tending to stay more loyal. Now, not completely; they're not a completely loyal, but they are much lower than other shoppers for switching. So I thought that was really interesting, and I think it does come to the things that Trader Joe offers. These are shoppers who really value quality in what they're buying. They value that products that have a great selection and a uniqueness and innovation in what they're seeing. And if you think about some of the things that Trader Joe's offers, they're very unique. They're very specific to the brand. They want things that are even good looking. Like that's actually something that is important to them. So they have the core kind of quality associated with the products they're selling. And then they have that connection to values. So a consumer or a shopper who is who's more likely to buy from a brand that aligns to their values will tend to be less sensitive to the price increases and will hang on just a little bit longer, right? That everyone reaches a threshold where at some point you're going to switch. But when we look at what we've seen is a trend towards switching away from the big brands, trend towards switching away. This audience, this subsegment of shoppers tends to be more loyal. And that's really because of what Trader Joe's is offering, but also what their brand stands for and how that aligns with their consumers.
One of the things I love looking at is shopper demographics. And especially when you get into a store that's a little more specialized, and we think we know who's shopping there, and sometimes the numbers come back and you have to augment your thinking a little bit. One of the statistics that jumped out at me was the Resonate study featured the demographics of Trader Joe's across 6 age groups, starting at age 18, going up to those 65 and older. The only group that was above 20% was those 65 and older. Was this a surprise to you? And do you have any idea why this age group, maybe, that number was a little higher than some of the younger age groups in the study?
So, yes, it's definitely the highest. I think you were pretty close. It ranged rate basically from 15 or 13 up to 20%. And obviously right in the middle of that 25 to 54, I think it was probably the biggest chunk of shoppers. But I think what you're starting to see is a change in older shoppers. There is a older conventional wisdom that suggests that older shoppers are only shopping for price, or they only shop, they're very basic in what they do. But we're seeing that more older shoppers are becoming more selective. They are interested in unique products, and they have the time to shop Trader Joe's as well as shop other stores. And I think one of the things that was interesting in the data about Trader Joe's shoppers is they are also members of, big warehouse stores. So they're probably a Costco shopper. They're probably a BJ shopper, whatever it might be. We can certainly dig in deeper and find out exactly which one, but they're doing a certain type of shopping here, right? They're coming for the unique products. They have the time to shop in the store and get the things that they want. It may not be the only place they're shopping, right? They're also shopping other places, and they're going to choose maybe the lower cost brand for some of the other products. But this place, Trader Joe's, has created a brand that has, a place in their heart for sure.
The other thing I found interesting when was looking at all the statistics, sometimes the confluence of what comes together. In this survey, 60% of Trader Joe shoppers are married, and 60% have no children under the age of 18. I thought that was interesting. Do you think that has an impact when Trader Joe's looks at something like this? Impacts what they're carrying, since 6 in 10 of their shoppers don't have little kids, but they are married. Does that have an impact on what they carry?
I think it would definitely, it's certainly something they're going to look at and evolve their mix. I think what's interesting about that is that, it kind of aligns to what we're seeing in general trends, right? The headlines that we've seen about, less people having less children in general, or having them later in life. Like you're maybe in a situation where you're married, but you don't have children yet. You still take a lot of interest in the types of foods that you're eating and how you're preparing your meals and whatnot. But then eventually, right, if you get to that point, you're going to continue to shop with a brand that you're loyal to, and then having those products are certainly, relevant. What I find interesting about the Trader Joe audience is they like the mix of products that they're having, and some of them, even though they may be sort of oriented towards children, are not necessarily children specific only, right? If you think about some of the cookie categories and things that they have, right? So I think it's appealing to that audience that likes that mix of different things, that doesn't necessarily have to have children to buy that particular product.
The study also showed Trader Joe's shoppers are more educated and have higher incomes. Within those two groups, why do you think they're more attracted to Trader Joe's?
Well, I think it goes back to some of the things that we said before, but this group is willing to shop based on things that are important to them. So that means if sustainability is important, and we know that they're 70% more likely to care about sustainability, or a company that cares about the environment, they're willing to spend that money on that brand. Now, some people have higher income and don't necessarily shop for those things, but they are very, very strong in the categories of caring about ESG related things, and being able to spend their money that way is a way that they choose to do it, right? That's how they express themselves from a values perspective. So I think you see shoppers that they're also willing to pay for quality. They're willing to pay for things that look good. They care about that, and that's where their money goes. So I would say you're not necessarily looking for someone who's just. These are people who care about their food, right? Who care about what they're getting. They want to have something unique, and they're willing to pay for it. And that's really why you see the higher income shoppers.
From I guess a social ideology standpoint, more than three-quarters of those surveyed identified themselves as moderates or kind of lean left or lean liberal. Um, so I'm going to ask a two-part question. I'll ask it in two parts. How does that impact the company and how it's run?
I mean, this is the age old question. I think there's been so much news that relates to companies and their decisions that are politically charged issues, and how they should react to that. Whether you're thinking about Target and some of the pressure that they had on them, or Bud Light and some of the pressure that they went through from their choices. But even going back to Goya and Goya's CEO choosing to support Trump, right, and the backlash that happened from that. I mean, it's a tricky spot for any brand right now to exercise their what their values are, when it's such a politically charged environment, you do have to approach this area delicately. And I'm always careful. Like, as a CMO, I understand our brand values are important. We have a great following where consumers actually are listening to brands, right? They have expectations for brands. And so you kind of have to balance, like, as a brand, we have values that are important to us. Consumers are looking to us to represent them in some way, but it's also very, very charged, and you really should understand what that makeup of your customers is when you want to do that. And it's almost sounds, I'm not even sure the word for it, but at the end of the day, the companies are responsible for making money and returning money to investors. And what I've observed in really, like, talking about data like this for the last 6 years, is that consumers have a different expectation for brands, right? They almost look to brands in a way beyond that. At the end of the day, we are here. We are here. I'm here, right, as a CMO, to help my company be successful financially and return to my investors a certain amount of money. And so, making a decision, some of them are easier than others, but supporting a candidate, for example, taking the stand to support a candidate could be something that will have a profound impact on your ability to drive that revenue, and or lose loyal customer base. So it's not a decision to take lightly. And really, the best thing that leadership should do is be very informed, but prior to taking action. I'm not suggesting you don't take action, right? We have a voice. You have brands like Patagonia that will clearly stand for things that they believe in. And the reason why they could be so successful about that is because when you look at Patagonia shoppers, they are immensely loyal to the brand. They are very supportive of the environment to a huge extent, and they are consistently willing to pay more, right? So when Patagonia takes a stand pro environment, right, they can do that. They can raise their prices and still have their consumers. But if you make a choice, your brand is different, right, doesn't have that kind of makeup of shoppers, you run a risk of alienating your customer base, driving sales down. It's really, really a challenging task for leadership to decide how and when to support political or politicians or other issues. I mean, even Roe v. Wade is something, as I say, no CMO would ever want to talk about in the last, for the length of my career. That is not something that we would want to talk about. But yet consumers are expecting you to have a position on that, and they will shop differently based on that. And we have data about all the top issues and what people care about. And in the midst of all the Roe v. Wade, there is massive shifting away from buying from brands and shopping with retailers who didn't support pro-choice. And then a very small but isolated group, but not small, like not very small, I should say, an isolated group, not that small, almost a third, that would shop if you supported pro-life. You need to understand what your customer base looks like before you take a stand on an issue like that, right? And any of these political issues, just about any issue could fall into this category right now. There's only a couple issues that people really agree with, and that's really supporting the military. So that, if you are veterans, support veterans across the board, shoppers are pretty happy. That's something that will give them the reason to buy. If you support actually mental health issues, fascinating new kind of data point that's coming out, that gives people a reason to buy. But some of those other issues can be very, very dangerous water to tread into, and you should be educated before you make those decisions.
Which I think is interesting because what you talk about, sort of the balance of what your customers want, and then you're beholden to investors. And when I look at their positioning on issues like labor unions and things like that, and some of the companies that they've sort of strategized with the NLRB and things like that, I found that a fascinating conversation because it runs counter to what a lot of their shoppers, I think when you're talking about better wages and job protections and things like that. And so I find that fascinating that from a business standpoint, I understand where they take it, but from a marketing or public perception standpoint, it's a completely different thought process. So I find that whole conversation and topic of discussion sort of interesting.
So Trader Joe's audiences are literally like two times more likely to go attend a protest. So they're, and so that's interesting. Like they support labor union. They definitely, they're activist consumers in a lot of different areas. If I look at, even how they felt about, don't say gay, we have that type of level of data. They would donate to a pro-choice group. Like they are an activist consumer for sure.
Right.
And they care about a lot of big issues.
So, Ericka, following up on sort of the activist mindset of a Trader Joe's consumer, Trader Joe's has taken some pretty strong stands about labor unions and fighting against unionization in its stores. Do you have data that shows what the customers and how their customers feel about labor unions?
We do, which I think is amazing, right? What a crazy question to ask, but what an important question to ask, just so that you as a leader can make a decision about how you present yourself in a situation like that, right? Not necessarily change the policy, but change maybe how you present the policy is a way to think about it. And when you look at Trader Joe's shoppers, there's a so about 16% of Trader Joe's shoppers will be more pro labor union. So we see to an extent about 23% more likely than an average person to be supportive of it. So I would say it's a small portion of their shopper base, but one that may feel intensely about it.
Interesting. So again, it's an issue that the people inside Trader Joe's maybe just need to be aware of, and its presentation, and maybe they need to think about the impact that it could have on somebody deciding, you know what, I don't like that stand on whatever the issue, and they go someplace else.
Right. When you think
Yeah.
about the combination today about how fast news travels, right? The social network that spreads information quickly, and the influence of people of influencers on channels. One decision can be amplified, and you can see a shift so quickly. So it's really important to have the latest information and understand where your customers lie. And I think what's exciting is maybe 5 years ago, we would talk about this and we go, well, geez, how are we going to get this information? Like, where would we get this information? Not everybody can do, study up on these things. Like, why would I even invest in understanding where my consumers feel about political issues or anything of that nature? And I think today, as technology is improving, one of the positive things that's happens with AI is we're going to be able to have access to that type of data to make better decisions and maybe not change what we do, but how we do it, right?